morning comes from the book of Deuteronomy, the 26th chapter. In the bulletin it says the 16th. It's actually the 26th chapter, verses 1 through 11. When you come into the land which the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance, and have taken possession of it, and live in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from your land that the Lord your God gives you. And you shall put it in a basket, and you shall take it to the place which the Lord your God will choose to make his home, to dwell there. And you shall go to the priest who is in office at the time, and say to him, I declare this day to the Lord your God, that I have come into the land which the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket from your hand, and set it down before the altar of the Lord your God. And you shall make response before the Lord your God. A wandering Aramean was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians treated us harshly, and afflicted us, and laid upon us hard bondage. Then we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice, and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place that gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And behold, I now bring the first of the fruit of the ground, which thou, O Lord, hast given me. And you shall set it down before the Lord your God, and worship before the Lord your God. And you shall rejoice in all the good which the Lord your God has given to you, and to your house, you and the Levite, and the sojourner who is among you. And this is the reading of God's word.
Thanks be to God.
Right there, thanks. This week, we begin our week of thanks. Thanksgiving has become this celebration of family, of food, of football. However, as we all know, Thanksgiving is not actually about food and football. Thanksgiving is at the very least a day on which we acknowledge what we have and what is important in our lives. So maybe food and football is important, and we should add it there. Families of all shapes and sizes and makeups come together around a table heaping with food, encircled with individuals thankful for many different things. The day of Thanksgiving has a long history to it, and it means many, many different things to many people. In our family, it means a time to join together, to come around a table which is beautifully set up with butcher paper on it and crayons, so that we can write what we're thankful for and draw pictures while we're sitting around talking about what we are thankful for. My favorite was the year my brother drew the many faces of my dad. It was great. He was a crab. He was a fireman. It was great. Or the little people that we draw, the doodling during our time of food and conversation, the time of family, and of course the ever-present football game. For the Levites, however, it's the festival of ingathering. And in the book of Leviticus it says, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land in the fall, you shall have a feast unto the Lord, and you should rejoice and be happy for 7 days. Now, we eat for 1 day. Maybe we should, expand this. 7 days of really good food. I think I can get behind that. The book of Deuteronomy also has much to teach us about Thanksgiving. In this the 26th chapter, we are provided a snapshot of worship. A worship which centers around the gift of food and the meanings of that gift and the implications of that gift. Food should be offered, should be shared, should not be hoarded, hidden, or consumed with no thought about the why or the where or the who. This chapter, this 26th chapter of Deuteronomy, ties together three very important facets of the Israelite belief and practice: history, worship, and invitation. Those are three very important parts of our worship as well: the history of it, the actual worship, and the invitation to join. The very origins of the people of Israel, our very origins, are rooted in the gift of land. Over and over again, the ancient forebears of Israel are promised land as a sign of God's ongoing presence. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you, announces God to Abram and Sarah. The couple destined to found the nations and the land. This sacred land is an inheritance, a gift from God to Abraham and his family and all the generations that followed. It's passed down from gift to gift to gift, from generation to generation to generation. The history of the gift of ground is at the center of the life of Israel, in the very soil of which they live and from which they prosper. Of course, their first worshiping act would then be giving back, giving thanks and giving from the soil. You shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from the land that God is giving you. Once the best fruit has been selected as a proper gift to God, the worshiper is to put it in a basket and bring it to the priest who has the authority and say, "Today I declare that God has given me gifts, and so I give back." The giver is to say that my ancestors were wanderers, and they were. They wandered from one place to another, God giving them these pieces of land and then somebody else taking it from them. They ended up in Egypt as slaves, always wondering where their next piece of food, their next anything was going to come from, until God sent Moses to release them. And they battled. Pharaoh telling them to leave, and then his heart hardening again. And Pharaoh telling them to leave and coming back. And finally they were free. But they made one little mistake, and so they're still wandering in the desert. And for 40 years, through a generation, they wander in the desert. And they finally get there, and so what do? Of course they rejoice. Of course they want to give back what they have been given. For us, for Christians, Thanksgiving is about giving thanks to God, our Creator, the Creator of everything. The fact is, however, that when we give thanks to God for all that we have, we are most often thankful for, as Jesus called it, food that perishes. Things that come and go. We might be thankful for our new car or our home, or food or clothing, for our jobs, for money to pay the bills. I'm very thankful for that. For things that are important, but things that perish. Things that come and go. We can certainly be thankful for our material wealth, for our homes, for our jobs, for the food on our table this Thanksgiving, but let us not mistake thankfulness for faith. Thankfulness for turkey and biscuits won't feed the hungry. Thankfulness for a closet full of clothing won't clothe the naked. Thankfulness for a good home and a good job won't house the homeless or right the economic injustice in our society. Only our faith in Jesus and our participation in God's mission will do that. As you may recall, those of you who know history, Thanksgiving began in 1621, a long time ago. Pilgrims came over in 1620, and in the winter of 1621, it was a battle. That year, of the 101 people who had arrived on the Mayflower, 55 of them died. And every family was touched by death and sickness. It was an extremely sad winter, a winter that they weren't wondering what to do with leftover turkey and dressing. That winter, they weren't the affluent society that they had been, preparing for a spending bash on the day after Thanksgiving. That winter, they weren't worrying about whether or not there would be snow in the mountains for skiing. No, it was a very tough winter, and only 46 people survived. And so that spring, the 46 sad survivors planted their crops and prayed. And God blessed them, and they had an abundant harvest. And so Governor Bradford, in thanksgiving to God, declared a 3-day holiday. See, even they had 3 days, multiple days. And they invited their friends who had helped them. They invited the Indians to join. Governor Bradford wrote a letter to England, and in it said, "It is by the goodness of God that we are far from want, and we are so far from want. We want you to be partakers of our plenty." And thus began the first Thanksgiving holiday. However, it didn't really catch on. There wasn't one in 1622 or 23 or 24, and there wasn't even one for another 100 years. About 170 years later, our first president, George Washington, revived the day and captured the spirit of Thanksgiving in his 1789 presidential proclamation. In it, he said, "It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of the Almighty, to obey His will, to be grateful to God for His benefits, and to implore His protection and favor. May we unite in this Thanksgiving this year for God's care and protection, for the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, for tranquility and peace, for civil and religious liberty, and for all God's great and various favors." Obviously, from these words, we clearly understand President Washington as being a man of deep faith, and thus the official American Thanksgiving in 1789 began. And so this Thanksgiving, may your table groan with delicious food, the very gift of the land offered to you by God. May you worship joyfully, giving back to the giver a rich part of the gift so freely given. May your table resound with laughter and warmth and family. May you invite some who have little access to food, laughter, and warmth, or give to them. Without them, you see, the feast can never quite be complete.